So thank you all for choosing to listen to another Global from Asia podcast. This show, I'm really excited to have with us today, Laurence Brahm. He's a veteran in China and Asia business and culture. We also have an amazing video recording today with Laurence, and he was just he's really, what I know is the search for Shangri-La, and he's doing amazing things with his studio and his really trying to help get, especially with this whole COVID-19 pandemic, trying to get the world to change their mindset, right? Would you say, or?
We have to change the mindset, of course. And, I spent years doing these expeditions searching for Shangri-La, which is really a misspelling of a term called Shambhala. Okay. And in the legend of Shambhala, we have this story about, sort of what they call the age of Kali, or the age of destruction, when the prophecies talk about pandemics and destruction of the environment, and a time when greed is the main principle driving mankind that causes a lot of infighting, and this sort of pretty much the situation we're in now. And Shambhala is that sort of age of Aquarius that's supposed to follow, when we get our heads back together and we realize that we have to be thinking about everything from a really multi-dimensional point of view. Everything's interconnected. The environment's interconnected. Health is interconnected. And business can be a driver for those things. Business can be a source of and finance of driving new technologies for environment, for healthcare, for addressing something like this pandemic, or it can be used to be the source of these problems. And it's really up to us and our intention and how we apply that intention to make the difference.
Sure. So this is fascinating. Before we get so deep into it, I'd love to hear your story. You came to China in 1981, I believe, as an exchange student. Was that?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I came in 81, and if we remember, U.S.-China relations were formalized by Jimmy Carter, Deng Xiaoping back in 79. So I was really the second wave of foreign students to come here. I mean, it was just really the beginning. And, I look back on those times and see where we've come in building the relationship between these two powers, these two giants on opposite sides of the globe. And of course, there have been ups and downs, hills and valleys. There have been rough times, there have been better times, but now we're in a really bad time. And it's really a time for, I guess, us veterans, people like myself, like you, people who've been around here for a long time, to reach out across borders. Yeah. Something like coronavirus knows no borders, knows no ideology, has no politics. It's a threat to us all. And it's really trying to find ways in which we can have collaboration beyond politics that can really be not only a way to defeat this virus and other challenges ahead, like climate, which is going to be hitting us just as badly in the years ahead, and to be able to do it working together. And I think it's really now time for us to rise above all of that. But unfortunately right now, because of politics, this relationship has probably gone into a valley rather than being in a peak. We've got to get it out of that valley.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I like your idea, what you said is there's no borders for this virus, right? As much as we want to think it's a political thing or whatever, it's everywhere, and we have to deal with it now. About your story, so I read your China Daily article, which we'll also include with the show notes for today. For those that also I recommend to read it. You originally were working in Hong Kong as a lawyer for a while, and you said in your article, which I'd love to hear some more on, is you kind of got tired of these huge multinational corporations that were really just doing it for profit only, not for the environment, not for the society, right? I mean,
sure. I was a lawyer for major multinational corporations. I mean, a lot of big industrial companies. And at the time as a lawyer, I think, I saw an investment come in. I saw suddenly people had jobs. There was suddenly, employment. There was suddenly some technology transfer. There was suddenly some industry. And we thought we were doing something good. And then I sat back and I realized it's not that good. It's creating a lot of side effects. It's creating tremendous damage to the environment. Very often the people would be fired after they were, the joint venture was done, and they would bring in new people. And what disturbed me is very often the core management, the executive level. I mean, I met all these chairmen of boards and CEOs would be coming out here all the time, and they couldn't care less about anything, not even their own shareholders, except to pump up the share price so they could be able to get rid of their shares at the right time, retire and binge live. And I really felt that I had trouble continuing on this path. And so I wanted to stop being a lawyer, working for these corporations, and use those skills in other areas, on environment, on social change. And so it was something I had to make a decision with.
Okay.
And that decision occurred in the year 2001, at the beginning of the millennium. And it just came with the idea of let's just stop everything and go searching for Shangri-La. It sounds like a crazy idea, but that was the turning point.
Great. So that was kind of my follow-up question. It was like a sudden change, or was it like a transition? Were you leading up to this, or you just woke up and decided I'm gonna find Shangri-La?
No sudden in any circumstances for anyone is really sudden. It accumulates over time. Okay. So it's sort of like you have this building of something, and then at some point there's just this tipping point. It could be just that tiny spark. In many ways, the coronavirus today is just a tipping point for a whole sequence of events that have been built up in terms of debt, in terms of structures. And it's going to change all those structures. And I guess from my story of Shangri-La, it was just a turning point. At a certain point, I was sitting with a very famous pop singer named Ai Jee Wei. We were very good friends, and talking about new ideas for her music and other things. And suddenly I came up with this idea of searching for Shangri-La. And she said, hey, this is incredible. You've got to do it. And the next thing I know is she put together for me my initial team of cinematographers, and also brought in Shambhala, who was the top music composer in China. He's Mongolian. Wow. And he did all of our music scores for us. And from that point, it was almost like things took over. You say I was driving it, but it was almost like it was a wave of events that took over. Next thing I knew is a few weeks later, we were in Lhasa filming. Awesome. And the search for Shangri-La had begun, not realizing where it would take us.
That's amazing. I mean, I love it too. I mean, you have to follow your heart, follow the trends. Was there any comments from your old corporate life colleagues when you announced this, or what were they thinking?
People thought I was crazy, and I think they thought I was even crazier when years later I moved to Lhasa, and from there we set up a number of social enterprises that were in the form of heritage hotels, and then we opened up medical clinics, and then we set up a program for education. We raised funds for eye operations, and we began what would become the very beginning of the social enterprise concept. At that time, I was very close with Mohammed Yunus, and we were working on this as a concept. Later, now it's called impact investing today. In those days, we called it social entrepreneurship. And I remember friends in the investment banking community, the banking community in Hong Kong, really looking at me like I was crazy and saying, well, now what are you doing? You're shoveling yak manure with farmers. I mean, they really looked down upon it and what we were doing. But actually, when you look at what we were initiating, I do feel that after coronavirus and we restructure our global economy, every company is going to have to be an impact investment enterprise. We're going to have to be running our businesses with the same kind of concept about how we impact environment, social, health factors, as much as we think about profit.
Okay, yeah, I love it.
Ultimately, that's our profit. Ultimately, our profit is in our environment. Our profit is in social health. Our profit is in the next generation. That is our biggest asset, and we're just not investing into it.
I like it, and I hope that's true. I hope that happens, because so many times people forget about, they know they're supposed to be on a diet, they know they're supposed to do good things for the environment, but then they watch a movie or they hear a speaker and then they go back to their normal life the next day, But I think this one is a big one, right? This virus has been around. it's affecting people's lives, work, business, everything. So it does seem like this one's got to be big enough to make people really make a change. We mentioned a few times the name Shambhala, and this is where I get to kind of blame my audience, but I'm not so familiar with Shangri-La, and I know if I'm not, then probably most of our listeners aren't so much either. So if you could fill, I think most of us think of the 5-star hotel, to be honest, the international hotel. I'd love to maybe give listeners a little bit of a Shangri-La or a Shambhala 101 kind of, so they can understand some of the basics.
The term Shangri-La was first coined by someone named James Hilton in a book he wrote called Lost Horizons. I think it was written around 1931 or something like that. And it then became one of the earliest blockbuster Hollywood movies. And it talked about a plane that crashed in the Himalayas, and the survivors found this, wonderful kingdom. Something like Bhutan, where you have gross national happiness. Everybody cares for everyone else. Everyone's happy. Everyone puts out. There's enormous care for the environment. There's a lot about gender empowerment, women's rights in that book. There's a lot of these factors. And hello?
I'm here. Yeah, the video cut for a sec, but
there's a lot of these elements in the book. And where did he get these ideas from? Actually, he'd never been to Asia, never been to the Himalayas. Most of this came from reports of Joseph Rock, National Geographic's first bureau chief in China, in Yunnan province, who lived in Lijiang and traveled extensively in the Tibetan and ethnic regions. And his reports came into the British Library, where Hilton basically borrowed these ideas. And Shangri-La is basically a pinyin. You could say, we say, Jiang Jieshi, the Kuomintang general, is called Chiang Kai-shek in English, or, Mao Zedong is called Mao Zedong. It's really a misspelling of Shambhala, which is a core concept which comes up in, Tibetan Buddhism, but is also shared by a number of the cultures of the Himalayas. It's also in the Hindu concept. It's out there, and it's very much part of the Himalayan worldview.
Great.
What is it?
Great. So it sounds beautiful, and we've actually connected through my amazing wife Wendy, and we've traveled a bit. Nothing like you have, but we've gone to some different places. We were in Kathmandu, and then we went to the birthplace of Buddha, or one of the birthplaces. I'm forgetting the name.
Lumbini, right?
Well, yes, and the tree, and there was where he was born. They had this kind of like fallen apart building that they you could go in and see the structure of where he was born, and it was pretty amazing. And there's so much of this. I wondered, back to this whole corporate and profit first, is this like a East versus West kind of thing? Is Shangri-La or Shambhala and this this environment, is this an Eastern kind of thought process? And then most of us
core in the Shambhala teachings is the concept of non-duality. A very important concept of Shambhala is the Kala Chakra, wheel of time and space. And the idea that there is no time, there is no space, so that everything is an interconnected matrix. It's an interconnected matrix over time, over distances. And if you look at it at an economic level, what happens with a riot in Kenya may be affecting coffee prices somewhere else, may be affecting you going to Starbucks. Everything's interconnected. And in that respect, it's really changing our outlook and working in a positive way, respecting the environment, respecting other people, making sure those that don't have, and building an interconnected, synergistic, harmonious world. And this is really what the core concept of Shambhala is. So it's not really a place that you have to go searching for and have to find beyond the mountains, beyond the clouds. It can be created right here, right now, anytime, just by switching switching on and being aware of what you're doing and how it affects others. And each individual can be creating Shambhala every second, every moment that we live and beyond. And so this is really the core concept. And so I think right now the coronavirus, again, brings this into focus, because the Shambhala prophecies are about a time when greed destroys the planet and we have to rebuild it as Shambhala. And I think now, as I said, rebuilding it where every business is an impact investor. Everybody is working in a different mindset than we did before. And just as the virus knows no borders, maybe a lot of our mental borders, ideologies need to come down. We need to be thinking as an integrated whole in the human race. So the core thinking of Western thinking and Asian thinking in this is Asian thinking that derives from this concept is non-duality. There's yin and there's yang, but you have to have the yin and the yang. They have to be working together. There's no black and white. There's no right or wrong. There is what is the situation right now? How do we transform it? As opposed to a Western thinking, which from the feudal period on in Europe, very much became right, wrong, good, bad, you, us, them, black or white. You're either a capitalist or you're communist. You're not both. You can't be planning a market economy. All of these things are barriers to our own perception of the world and ourselves. And so it's really trying to break those down and have this yin-yang view of the world, which is, I think, at the core of the Shambhala.
Okay, this is great. I like it. Yeah, I agree. Again, with Wendy, I always watch these movies and documentaries, so I see the whole idea of there's no individual, there's no I, right? In like Buddhist thinking or in Eastern thinking, there's we're all part of the one system. We're all part of this system. Whereas like Western, or maybe it seems the way most Westerners are raised is there's me and this is mine and this is my food and this is my clothes and this is I am here and this is now, and it's all about me usually, or me. This is yours. This is mine. This is the line, right? Like that's kind of how I remember my Western life.
One of the most important stages in practice in the Tibetan Buddhist practice is a process called to, which is basically to destroy your ego, to try and eliminate that and think in a multifaceted, interconnected way where you're part of a universal matrix. You're not just the only person, me first type of thing. And I think that's really where our planet's going to have to go. It's getting too many people, too crowded, not enough resources, not enough water. And the coronavirus is just a harsh reminder of many things we have to do now to change our economic models and in many cases our social perspectives.
Let's talk about your experience. So you left court, the lead lawyer, hotshot lawyer, Central Hong Kong, Beijing, travels and multinational corporations, and you went to Lhasa and started searching for Shangri-La. Do you want to give us a little bit of an idea of how that experience went and how the journey went?
It was transformational for me because we didn't know what Shangri-La was. We had an idea that it came from this book. We traveled all around the Himalayan plateau asking one question: where is Shangri-La? And it was really amazing the variety of answers we got. And then we did a film. We did a book. I did a book. We did a film series. We did a CD. We came up with music. And then we decided to do a second expedition. And that second expedition was to go and find Joseph Rock's own materials and then match it to the book Lost Horizon and really figure out what Joseph Rock was reporting, what he saw through his eyes, and what James Hilton was extrapolating from those reports to become the myth of Shangri-La in Lost Horizon. But during that journey, a really interesting thing happened, and we suddenly really became aware that Shangri-La was Shambhala, and this Tibetan concept, or this Vajrayana Buddhist concept of the Shambhala realm, and the entire story of the age of Kali, or age of destruction that we're in now, really became apparent. And we did then a third film, a third documentary called the Shambhala Sutra, because there is a sutra that has all these prophecies. And we went looking for the sutra in Western Tibet, and we went all the way out to what's the lost kingdom of Gulga, which is a mysterious kingdom because it rises out of the desert and it's all abandoned. And we tried to, was that Shambhala? We were still searching for a physical place. Now, fast forwarding, after setting up a social enterprise and the Himalayan Consensus, Silk Spice Road Dialogue, different, multilateral working groups, we, working on environment and technology. And that's where I put my lawyer skills then for many years, is working on environmental policy, working in environmental negotiations. But a few years ago, in 2017, we had the idea of doing a new series of films, searching for the Lotus-born master, and the story of Guru Padmasambhava, or in Chinese, 炼华生大师, the Lotus-born master, who is the father of Vajrayana Buddhism, and asking whether he might also be the father of quantum physics, and looking at the multi-dimensional matrix, not just from an economic point of view, but from an electromagnetic field point of view. How is everything interconnected at a level of science as well as a level of economics?
Okay. Amazing. So yeah, you kind of went through the whole last, really quickly. Thank you for that journey. So then you have a few documentaries, and that was up until 2017. And we've been seeing, for those that are watching the video version of this, we've seen a couple, you're outside, your courtyard, and now your studio. Can you share where you are now, like where we are now in this journey?
Sure. So we've done 2 films in the series about Guru Padmasambhava, the Lotus-born master. The first, we went searching for his own journey. He was born in Pakistan. He lived in India, Nepal, Bhutan, and eventually he came to Tibet, and he traveled all over the western regions of China. There's even records of him in Donghuang teaching these concepts that we call today Tibetan Buddhism or Vajrayana Buddhism. And really, we're asking the question, his 8 manifestations, or his 8 appearances, because he always appears in 8 different types of images, are these representing 8 quantum energy fields? And was he the father of quantum physics? Or, if we want to ask the question differently, are the traditional wisdom that we can find in Buddhism, that we can find also in Hindu, that we can find in shamanism, is this built on concepts of understanding universal phenomena that are also as scientific as the empirical science that emerged really just over maybe 150 years ago, 200 years ago at the most, that process of emerging? And was the empirical Newtonian science rejecting a lot of things that could not be explained because they can't be explained, and therefore not understanding them? And when we start to look at quantum physics, and we start to look at technologies today, we start to look at the interconnectivity of all the different fields we're now discovering, because we're realizing that in addition to electromagnetic fields, there's all kinds of fields out there that, we are now beginning to understand. Did ancient knowledge know something we didn't know? And should we be listening to some of that in terms of also their teachings about environment, interconnectivity of everything? And so we've done 2 films on the Lotus-born master. We're now working on the 3rd film. And what we're doing right now every day is we're working on a different film. We're working on something called Searching for Kung Fu, which is looking at the Chinese martial arts and international martial arts as they're practiced, and looking at it not just as fighting, not just as, martial arts ultimately became MMA and UFC, That's not as important as the philosophies behind that and how those philosophies are part of health, body, mind, spirit, well-being. And at a time like coronavirus, when not everybody can have access to medical care, where medical care has become actually, in some places, in some countries, only exclusive for the elite or the rich, everyone needs to be able to have preventive medicine. And a lot of that comes down to techniques of breathing, of conditioning, of mind, of being able to use your mind to control your energies, to control your health. And I think right now, this is going to be the beginning also of a revival of many traditional techniques that have proved over time, people can be in top physical condition even without a gym if they know how to do these techniques and they know how to take care of themselves. These are ancient solutions for the future. And I think this is what we're doing now.
Great. It's really exciting. Okay, so, I'm sure our listeners are wondering what can they, of course I'd love to maybe link or share how people could watch or consume your content, your works. Is there some actions people could take? Just keep in mind, a lot of our listeners are like e-commerce sellers, business, entrepreneurs. It's English language, so it's Westerners, maybe either in Asia or want to do business in Asia. What can they do, or what things?
My biggest message is, how can we use the technology positively? Because I see a lot of technology being used for negative purposes. I watch my kids turn on the video. They're looking at YouTube. They're looking at stuff. A lot of it's hate. A lot of it's anger. I see it all the time. And I also see that this is very much part of a process of programming our youth to think in a way that fits into the politics today. Anger, greed. I mean, the idea that people should be driving fancy cars all the time and having lots of gold chains and wealth. And I don't know if this is a standard for a good person or not. I don't think it is. Mm-hmm. I think that these are creating artificial goals and objectives, and they're telling people these are the values you should have. And when are we going to start to have videos that are showing people rebuilding communities, going out and working on new energy systems? And having been a lawyer doing a lot of advisory work on green energy, on environmental issues, I can say the core issue right now is how to convert the grids. It's the cell phones, it's the computers that are sucking up energy like crazy, like it's never been used on this planet before. Rare earth, other materials, and they're not being replenished. And that energy is coming most of the time from fossil fuels. And if we're going to be using electrical appliances for our communication, because that's all these things are, is electrical appliances, but they're very misusing energy appliances. We have to start to then have technologies that can solve this problem. Every single cell phone should have as its panel solar panels. That technology exists. It can be used. People should boycott until they produce that, because you need to be able to let's have action to be able to solve these problems right now. Everything that involves renewable energy involves big data. Data is core. Data is core to energy efficiency. And we need to be putting the innovation into these areas. And this is where innovation can occur. Right now, the innovation is not occurring in this area. Innovation is all about consumption. It's all about how quick you can get a Coke delivered to you or a coffee, or it's an entertainment which is violent and anger inciting. When are we going to have entertainment that's teaching people to work together? I want to see something like that come out. I want to see something that's unifying us rather than tearing us apart. And that's what Shambhala is all about. That's what the journey to Shangri-La is all about. And technology can be the greatest force for improvement, or it could be the cause of a lot of the problems that we're plunging into right now.
Okay, this is great. Yeah, hopefully this motivates some listeners and viewers to take action, to maybe the next product they sell is more, like you said, maybe if they're an inventor, entrepreneur, doing a new product or design, just try to think more about sustainability, impact investing, or like you mentioned, or It's so true though. Like the videos now are all. I guess that's what the human brain likes. That I guess wants to watch. Because they say they make the video to get people to keep watching, right? So they say that they keep making these apps so that you stay on the app longer. You don't leave. You're checking your notifications. You're checking the feed. You're checking, what somebody said on your posts, or the newest article.
It's creating a lot of emotion, a lot of instability in young people. A lot of my children's they talk with their friends about how they're emotionally disturbed by the stuff on Instagram. They feel insecure. They have when I was a kid, we used to go out hiking and camping, and we would go up into the mountains, and we would learn how to even do survival camping. And that sometimes I just tell the kids, put your phone away, throw it out, just walk away from it, have time for yourself, connect back to this planet, and then use the technology intelligently to save the planet. Because if we don't, we're not going to have a planet to live on very soon. And the coronavirus is bringing this right to our face. It's bringing it right home. Great. In this case, I have to say I compliment the Chinese. They used 5G. They used a lot of big data to get control of the virus, to do the quarantine systems. And in many ways, it was very simple application of the technologies, but it was putting it in the right place to solve the problem. And in America right now, we have a huge problem with the coronavirus. It's totally out of control. And America is a country where we're supposed to be leading the world on technology. Mm-hmm. It's not because we're not leading the world on technology. It's because it's been used in the wrong way. Yeah. And now we have to use it in the right way. We have to change our perception.
I don't want to get too political, but some people worry about the data. Where is the data going? Who's using it? Who's accessing it? Of course, it can be used for good, like controlling the virus, but it could also be used for bad. That's a fear that people have.
The only safe computer in the world is one that stays in the box and is never opened. As soon as you open your Apple, as soon as you open your computer and you turn it on, people are sucking your data. Yeah. Facebook, Twitter, Google, Amazon, Agreed. They're all taking it. And who owns these companies? Ultimately, big state, because they're supported by quantitative easing, now repo funding, which is effectively treasury debt, which goes into the stock market. So in many ways, they themselves are beholden to the state apparatus. And if you look at what happened with, you look at Cambridge Analytica, case as an example, nothing's safe. All forms, anyone who accesses your data, anyone who picks up a cell phone and uses it is giving away their own information that can be used by anyone, whether it's a state or a hacker, they can use it. And this stuff's so easy to hack into. I mean, the mythology that you have security is a complete joke. Mm-hmm. And so the reality here is every single individual have to put our mind in the right space. And if we're starting to have people whose mind is contaminated with ideas of hatred, anger, all these things are being disseminated, of course they're going to hack, they're going to use this stuff wrong. And so if we can start to have a momentum of movement toward using this stuff in the correct way, then we're going to change things. And I think that's what's the bottom line of it. Your security on your appliance is never secure unless you don't use an appliance. If you completely walk away from this stuff, which I do a lot of the time, you go up in the mountains, then no one's watching you and listening to you. But if you're even holding it, of course, it's being used. And so now is the time for us to recognize that, not to fool ourselves, and say, okay, each and every one of us in the Shambhala tradition has to join hands as a unified field of all of us and start to use this stuff in the right way.
Agreed. Okay, well, Laurence, I know you're busy. I know you got a lot of we've been talking for a little while, and I appreciate your time. Maybe some words. How can people find more about your projects and what you're working on? I know ShambhalaStudios.com, right? Is a space, or
that's probably the easiest way to follow us. Okay, ShambhalaStudio.com. Also, there's Shambhala Studio on WeChat, on TikTok, on other different platforms. Those are usually short videos, little snippets of what we're doing. We try and share as we go along in our journey, so that other people can share in that journey. Okay. And hey, we all take the journey together.
Sure. And then just so we get some more, I should have brought up at the beginning, but your location, where are you? You're in Beijing? Or
Right now, I'm in the Shambhala studio in Beijing. This is in central Beijing. It's right in the old neighborhood, the old Hutong, we call it, old alleyway, back Mingqing Dynasty. And this is our, central studio for our work here. We are post-production, editing, and planning.
Great.
We also have a studio out at the Great Wall, a beautiful studio, which is also a martial arts studio, and a retreat center for meditation, for martial arts, for yoga. And the Shambhala studio there is where we do a lot of our production for the Searching for Kung Fu and other, Kung Fu martial arts related programs that we have in Unstack, you can say.
Great.
We also have a studio in Kathmandu, right by Bodha, which is the Great White Stupa in Kathmandu. And that studio, we can have a place called Shambhala Cafes. So anybody who's in Kathmandu and wants a nice cup of latte can come to
I wish I had known
Shambhala Cafe, and our studio is just upstairs. So
I was there a couple of years ago in that white, I think I know what you're talking about, the white, you can walk around and ring the bell, and then it's a really beautiful all white, like huge statue. Yeah, it was amazing.
We're right near that stupa, and that's where we do a lot of our, most of our expeditions launch from there. That's our studio for our field work.
Okay, great. All right, Laurence, thanks again for sharing with us, and good luck with your next documentary.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurence.